Yeah, hi sir, I can.
Yeah, great, great. So, hi guys. I just had some time, so thought we'll just connect. I'm getting too many queries on chemicals for obvious reasons. The stocks have corrected a lot, and there is a near consensus that majority of the companies would disappoint in Q1. We don't know how the markets would react to those specific companies. So I thought rather than individually responding to those DM queries, etc., let's get online for a quick perhaps an hour long session if possible. And Prince has kindly agreed to be the co-host, so you can direct your questions as a reply to this session that has started, and Prince will try and be as impartial as he possibly can, and we can just roll through those questions. Thank you.
Sir, meanwhile, we can start with some overview in the opening note. Meanwhile, the questions will come and I read it out to you.
Yeah, so I think that there is no change in my perception of view. So I've seen one note from Kenneth Andrade's a recent interview where he says that there is either China or no China, and there is no such thing as China plus one. I know Kenneth is far more knowledgeable, and he's got far more wisdom than most people that I at least know or respect. But in this case, I would slightly beg to disagree with Kenneth's view, in the sense that there was always a China plus one, or a Europe plus one, or a US plus one. There was definitely some plus one. And the reason I'm saying that is, if I look at the last 10-year cash flows and sales growth of any quality business, be it whatever, right? You pick any chemicals enterprise which you believe has rewarded well over the last decade, and where the quality pedigree is unquestionably strong, and the management of the promoter group is strong, and you do a CAGR on the starting sales and the 2022 sales for that business, the cash flow that they were having in, let's say, 2010 or 2012, and the cash flow they reported last year or this year, and you do a CAGR mapping, you would find an exceptionally high number, much more than what the global chemicals market has grown. So if Indian companies have significantly outperformed, so the good Indian companies have significantly outperformed the chemicals market growth, it tells us one simple thing, that Indian companies have gained market share. Now, that market share gain may have come at the expense of a European player, or an American player, or a Korean player, or a Chinese player. I don't know. And to be honest with you, I don't care. Is the comparative advantage of India, so the cost and the competence put together, that has definitely played out over the last decade or so. So there is definitely a plus one. uh, the problem, so where do we go from here? Is there any change in the structure? Structurally, is there any change? So structurally, there is no change on the cost economics as far as the India as a lower, comparatively lower capex opex jurisdiction is concerned. That remains unchanged. There is no change in the competence of Indian scientists to partner with global innovators and generic companies, and provide the tailor-made custom solutions. None of that has really changed. So if I put these two things together, structurally there is no change. The reason why the chemicals, there is a price correction, and there is a sales degrowth, there are a couple of factors. One is China has come back with full force as far as the production is concerned. China has not come back as far as the consumption is concerned. There are um, based on my data and my sources, there are job losses happening in China. So a demand compression across all the industries in China. So they have started offering significant discounts on new car sales, because everything is suffering. It's kind of a near recession type environment in China, and every sector, every downstream sector, from autos to real estate. So real estate has been struggling for quite a long time, but the other sectors have started struggling, and the reason is that the Japanese and other companies have started moving out of China. So either they are setting up shops in Taiwan or Korea or somewhere else, and because they've started moving out of China, even if it's a Chinese company setting up its own factory in Taiwan, they would not be hiring the Chinese workers. They will be Taiwanese people, right, or Vietnamese people working in those factories, which means that whosoever was working in China had to be laid off. And if you start laying off people, then your local economy will start suffering. And chemicals are nothing but a proxy to play the consumption. So chemicals go into paints, pigments, automotives, paper, textile, pharmaceuticals, you name it. So if a simple way, the reason I was interested in chemicals and I'm still interested is because it's a proxy to consumption. So because Chinese consumption is struggling, their chemical industry is also struggling to deploy the output locally. So they've got no choice but to start dumping or exporting at whatever price. And most of these companies, they don't care about their economics. So they may even be selling. They may be selling at near break even or wafer thin margin, or even losses, just to keep the plants operational. That's one part of the the headwind that's coming from China side. Now imagine there was a war and it's still going on in the European region, and a lot of businesses were not operating at optimal capacity. We saw the BASF numbers, right, recently, and some of the other European chemical companies have given very muted guidance going forward. So if those factories have not been operating, the European economies by and large are struggling, there is a consumption slowdown in European region as well. And same logic applies here. If there is a consumption slowdown, that means the demand for chemicals will also be slowing down. And a lot of these Indian companies, they supply N-1, N-2 to these European partners or companies. So it's a whole knock-on effect across the chain. So this is, I think, is the sole reason, rather than assuming that whatever was the tailwind is gone. It's a global phenomena. Chemicals is a there's a large component of exports that happens from these chemical companies, and all of it is kind of getting reflected in their sales and operating margins. None of this, or this was not expected to a large extent, maybe in 18 months. If you go back during those IPO days of chemicals, right, in 2021, none of this was on the spreadsheet of any of the analysts who were writing the research reports or the bullish commentary. Everyone was assuming that this story will continue at the same pace, and the valuation multiples of those 70, 80, 90x in some cases, they are well justified because the growth is sustainable. All that has turned upside down. And as I said on my BQ Spaces session last year in September, the twin engines have to be in your favor. So you have to be in a business or a stock where the earnings are improving, and valuation multiples that you get on those earnings are improving. In case of chemicals, the exact reverse has happened. There is a compression in earnings, and because the multiples were not prepared, or they were not assuming that compression, it's a negative surprise, and the valuation multiples have started tumbling as a result. So you get both engines failing, and you cannot sustain at 40,000 feet. You have to come down, and that's what these stock prices are showing us today. That would be my monologue to begin with.
Right. I also see Aditya sir, so I would request him just in case he is free and willing to come. So I have sent you the request. So I read out the questions meanwhile, Sajal sir.
Yeah, hi,
So
hi Aditya. You can't be a listener. You add him as a speaker, because Aditya was very vocal, and honest on, not so he I remember what he said. He said that there are more value traps than value buying opportunities on that BQ Prime session, the Spaces session we had last year in September. I think I shared the link to that recording very recently as well. So um, I think we should have. Yeah, he's joined as a speaker. Hi, Aditya.
Hi, Sajal bhai. I'll be on the listen only mode here. Chemicals will have nothing to contribute.
Yeah, but it's part of the value chain, right? So your initial thoughts in terms of, because see, if a lower chemical prices will definitely uh, be favorable to the downstream. So whosoever is consuming the chemicals, and they have been struggling over past at least 2 years, if not more, and a lower sort of input price will help the downstream sectors from FMCG to pharma.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I mean, that's something that we have been waiting to see for a long time now. I think last 3 to 4 years, chemical prices and solvent prices, everything went up. And, be it the paint industry, be it the textile industry, be it the pharma industry, everybody was sort of bearing the brunt of these higher chemical prices. So I think it's fair for all of us to assume that in the coming year, as chemical prices dwindle down, various industries that use more chemicals as a input cost, they will benefit from the benign pricing environment in chemicals.
Yeah, thank you. So, Prince, I think we can crack on. If you have any questions, please filter them out. Try and avoid any stock specific question, and some, because we have got limited time. So let's stall through the good ones first, and then we'll see how much we could cover.
all right. So Shiva is asking which businesses and Indian players likely to benefit from Chinese situation and lower prices of KSM and other APIs.
Yeah, so simple, just exactly what Aditya explained, right? Any consumer of those chemicals will be the beneficiary. So if you guys remember, there was a tweet that I made in 2019 or there, about that, if the commodity prices are down, think, where you should be positioning your capital, and if the commodity prices are up, where you should be positioning your capital. So if commodity prices are exorbitantly high, like the scenario that we had in 2021 or 2022, the margins of all the FMCG and pharmaceutical companies, and the API companies who were importing KSMs and intermediates were suppressed. They were depressed, right? So the reverse is now happening. So whosoever is importing sort of KSM intermediates from China, they would benefit, and then depending upon the economics of their business, they may or may not be required to pass through that benefit to the consumer. So if it's a branded business, they are under no obligation to pass through the drop in the prices in the finished product. And that's the power of the brand. That's the moat in the brand, right? So there is no compulsion on them to pass through. So they will definitely retain majority. So same for FMCG. They may or may not pass through the price benefit, because if you look at companies like from Pidilite to the food consumer businesses like the Britannias, and their packaging and everything has got, the back end, or the impact is coming from crude derived chemicals, and majority of this is linked to, directly or indirectly, from all these bulk chemicals have an impact coming out of China, how China is reacting to price and volume, etc. So all of these industries will be the beneficiary. And if you're a branded business, you are under no obligation to pass through. If you are an innovator CDMO business, your contract was always fixed. So you are under no obligation to pass on any benefit to the innovator, because when the raw material prices were high, you were biting the bullet. Now the raw material prices are low, you will be the beneficiary, because the way these contracts are structured, you gain from a lower input price and you pay the penalty for a higher input price, nothing to do with the innovator. So that's another area that should be beneficiary. If you are in a generic API industry, then you will ultimately have to pass on, and you should pass on, because you are playing a partner. Well, assuming that you are a partner to your end customer, and you're not just an opportunistic supplier. At some point in time, maybe after a lag of 1 quarter, or when your contract is due for renewal, at that point in time you would have to pass on the benefit to your end customer in the generic API that I'm talking about. So you may not be able to retain all the benefit that you may get from lower price, lower input pricing of chemicals. That's how I would see it. Aditya, anything to add if I've missed anything, or if I've misunderstood anything?
No, nothing to add. Yeah, I think you basically explained it very well.
Okay, thank you. Next one.
So another question, yeah, sir, your comment on dye industry, they face double threat of low demand and excess capacities and add Chinese export as you suggested.
Correct. So that is the double whammy. On one side, if you are getting a dumping on the input side, and your demand is also facing challenges, then that's a double whammy. Because see, a lower utilization, see, any asset where the fixed cost is reasonably high, will be penalized for underutilization. And all of these chemical businesses, these API businesses, these pharmaceutical businesses are inherently high fixed cost businesses, because you cannot hire and fire people, right? So if you have got a field force of, let's say, 6,000 people, or if you've got a large factory where the operators, workers, HR, finance, supply chain, all the departments are there, you cannot fire those people overnight. So your fixed cost is high, and if your plants are underutilized, there will be an operational deleverage on your P&L. Because the demand is low, you cannot produce at your rated capacity. So there is one negative headwind coming from there. And then on top of it, if you're finding challenges on the input side as well, then yeah, God save you. So that those things will play out. How long will this scenario last, where the demand is depressed? Because see, if everyone is little uncertain about the economy, and in whichever country they are, then people will try and not indulge into discretionary spending. People will try and get that old car serviced, and not or delay the decision of buying a new car. But if you are a chronic patient, or if you get acute illness, you cannot delay that consumption. So you have to consume. So the your mind will be uh, tuned to only consume what you have to consume, and try and delay. If you're really struggling with your finances, you will naturally, it's human tendency, you'll play safe, and you will try and delay those discretionary spending. So all those industries um, will suffer. And because, as I said in my opening remarks, chemicals is a proxy to the global consumption. So of course, the ripple effect will be felt on the suppliers of those, the producers of those chemicals as well. DNCC management, I mean, is very honest management. You don't have to read the whole transcript. You just read the first paragraph, or 2 or 3 paragraphs of Bimal's opening remark in the Q4 FY23 transcript. You will get the gist of everything that I have mentioned.
Right. So
Ishmohit has also
So
joined. Is
Kaushik,
he a speaker or is he a listener?
sir is a
So
speaker.
you should speak then.
Ishmohit, like what's the overview you have of a chemical space?
हाय होप एवरीवन इज डूइंग वेल. बहुत डिस्टॉर्शन तो नहीं है ना पीछे प्रिंस आवाज में?
No, it's fine.
राइट. आई थिंक यार ब्रॉडली व्हाट इज हैपेंड, जैसे सर ने भी बताया कि सॉल्वेंट्स वाली साइड पे या फिर जो बैकवर्ड्स फार्मा में भी यूज हो रहे हैं, जैसे केमिकल है सीटोनिट्राइल. तो सीटोनिट्राइल का जो प्राइस है, मतलब वी बीन ट्रैकिंग अल्काइल अमाइंस एंड बालाजी 2017-18 से हम लोग इस इंडस्ट्री को ट्रैक कर रहे हैं. एंड तो प्राइसिंग लेना भी ईजी है बिकॉज डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर्स मतलब इसके मिल जाते हैं, इंडिया मार्ट पे भी मिल जाते हैं, तिजोरी पे भी मिल जाते हैं. सो गिव यू अ स्मॉल एग्जांपल, आई थिंक अल्काइल ने 2017-18 में काफ़ी बड़ा केपेक्स करा था फॉर असीटोनिट्राइल एंड फॉर बेसिकली मिथाइलामाइंस के डाउनवर्ड इंटीग्रेशन के लिए DMA-HCl में. केपेक्स जैसी लाइव आया, तो जस्ट टू गिव यू अ सेंस की हाउ स्ट्रॉन्ग द प्राइसिंग वाज, दैट वी वर बेगिंग इन कि इस कंपनी का 200-220 करोड़ का पैट 2023-2024 में हो जाएगा. एंड 2019 से 2020 में विद इन 4 क्वार्टर्स, एक्चुअली मैं जो 4 साल बाद का सोचा था वो 4 क्वार्टर्स के अंदर हो गया. बिकॉज प्राइसेस ऑफ असीटोनिट्राइल वेंट फ्रॉम 140-130 रुपीज पर किलो टू 280-290 रुपीज पर किलो. एंड आई थिंक इसका Q4 FY20 था या Q1 FY21 में EBITDA मार्जिन 42% हो गया. मतलब दैट इज अनहर्ड ऑफ कि आज तक इस कंपनी का इतना नहीं हुआ. अब नाउ द ऑपोजिट थिंग इज हैपनिंग बिकॉज असीटोनिट्राइल के प्राइसेस बढ़ गए. अ लॉट ऑफ प्लेयर्स एक्सपैंडेड, राइट. इंडिया के नहीं एक्सपैंड करे, एक दीपक नाइट्राइट की एक प्राइवेट सब्सिडरी है दीपक फार्मोवा करके, उन्होंने भी एक्सपैंड करा. बालाजी अमाइंस न्यू टेक्नोलॉजी ले आया है, अल्काइल अमाइंस ने भी एक्सपेंशन कर दिया. बाहर जो आइनियोस ग्रुप है उन्होंने भी एक्सपैंड कर दिया. And I think because demand also softened, the prices have again crashed from 280 rupees per kilo to 130 to 120 rupees per kilo. Now it has gone even below the pre-COVID level. In terms of price, it has gone even below that level. But still the valuations do not reflect that. मतलब valuation तो आज भी 50-60 का P मिला हुआ है. I don't know why, but that is just a sense कि how wild the things became. अभी इस सेक्टर में like how I'm seeing things is that some of the like businesses will have a high base even of FY23 क्योंकि अभी उनके prices अभी भी गिर रहे हैं. But very few chemical companies, especially I like to point in this CSM or या fluorinated space में, which will be able to still hold on to the pricing of the chemicals that they're selling. हो सकता है रेफ्रिजरेंट गैस में 1-2 क्वार्टर का जरूर हिट हो, बट रेफ्रिजरेंट गैस में भी सितंबर में R32 की बड़ी बड़ी कैपेसिटीज लाइव जा रही है इंडिया में. नॉट ओनली वन प्लेयर, ऑल द 3 प्लेयर्स आर गोइंग लाइव विद द कैपेसिटी बिकॉज यूरोप एंड US दोनों में रेफ्रिजरेंट गैसेस का शटडाउन चल रहा है. FMC एक और एग्रो इनोवेटर है जिसके आई वाज जस्ट चेकिंग द रिजल्ट्स ओनली. So they were saying that there is a destocking cycle, but the end demand remains extremely strong. Like the consumption of the chemicals has been that like that ways only. But क्योंकि जो generic prices of ag chem है, जैसे generic molecules I will classify something जो आरती इंडस्ट्रीज जैसे बेंजीन में जो derivatives बेचती है, तो उनका 80 to 85% mix will be generics. Whereas something like, again, I'm not taking any buy sell recommendation by any means because industries are dynamic, so one needs to track them as well. So जैसे SRF में 85% of the agrochemical molecules sale that they do is for innovator molecules. And out of that, I think they have like sort of a monopoly for SDHI intermediates, जहाँ पे मतलब they are the largest in the world and lowest cost as well. So those type of opportunities you have to keep assessing because if there is a down cycle, even in a down cycle, you will see that some of the companies, जैसे PI का down cycle 2016-18 में था, down cycle में 28 और 27 का P रहता था. And once the upcycle came, it went to 40-50 P. I'm not saying that you have to think about it that way, but you have to basically do the hard work and differentiate between run-of-the-mill chemical company at this point of time and one of the chemical companies where you know कि यार इनका 4-5-7 साल का runway है and they'll be putting in 10-15,000 crore whatever in capital spending and you know कि they'll be able to hold on to pricing because the company is doing something differentiated. तो इस टाइम पे मैं इस सेक्टर को इस टाइम पे ऐसे देख रहा हूँ. So this is how I'm basically viewing things and my sense of basically narrowing down on opportunities has basically bought me only 2-3 companies जिसमें इस टाइम पे मैं बहुत ज़्यादा फोकस कर रहा हूँ because पूरे सेक्टर में 60-70 कंपनीज हैं उसमें से आप सारी हटाने लग जाओगे तो एंड में 4-5% ही इस टाइम पे बचेंगे, जहाँ पे प्रमोटर पे भी कंफर्ट आता है, प्राइसिंग पे भी कंफर्ट आता है, और ये भी पता है कि यार ये कंपनी कहीं आज से 5 साल जाने नहीं वाली। इसका कैश फ्लो जो आज अगर इतना है तो 5 years डाउन द लाइन इट विल इंक्रीज ओनली। इट्स वेरी रिमोट पॉसिबिलिटी कि उसका प्लांट में ब्लैक स्वान ना हो जाए, तो उसका कैश फ्लो ग्रोथ विल स्टॉप। दिस इज हाउ आई एम सॉर्ट ऑफ थिंकिंग अबाउट इट कि अगर नियर टर्म हेडविंड्स हैं तो हाउ टू बेसिकली फैक्टर इट इन योर थॉट प्रोसेस।
Absolutely. Well explained, Ishmohit. Thank you. And just one or two data points that I would like to add about Mr. Market in general. Mr. Market does a second by second DCF of every stock. So the listed price at any point in time during the trading hours is market doing the DCF for you. Right or wrong, doesn't matter, because DCF is like that, that Hubble telescope. A small change in the variable, you are in a completely new galaxy, and market does that automatically for any stock. So these IPOs of these chemical companies, when they came, market assumed that their rich cash flows and high margins are there for the next many decades, and the asking price for the valuations that they were asking for the IPO were justified, and in many cases the stocks appreciated above their IPO prices after listing. So whosoever was buying was under the impression that these cash flows will or the margins will only improve from here on, and they are not no longer inflated, there is no bubble, and they assigned a multiple. So this is from 2021. I'll give you an older example from pharmaceutical space, 2014-15. All the US generics companies were minting money, and market gave a very high multiple to those inflated cash flows, assuming that this rosy scenario is here to stay permanently. There is no threat of disruption coming from US FDA. The pricing environment will continue to be benign, so on and so forth. So market ignored any of the risks, and it gave a very high multiple to those cash flows across Lupin, Sun, all of them. And we know, how the compounding story has panned out in each of these businesses, starting somewhere around 2015. Most of them have still not crossed their highs, so they have not even beaten the inflation or the bank FD. So, and then I'll give you another example where, see, product concentration is a double-edged sword. If you are banking on one or two products, it could be Vinity Organics, it could be PI Industries, and both have got product concentration risk. And if those products are minting money, right, markets will give them a ridiculously high multiple. So and that reflects in the valuations. And I am always very skeptical and afraid of this kind of a scenario in any of my investments. So I try and avoid any company where there is a product concentration, because in good times I know I will get a disproportionate multiple, but if there is any disruption to those money making products, one, two, or three, then my whole thesis will collapse, and I will be sitting on significant losses. So I intentionally avoid any company where there is a product concentration risk. And if you look at PI Industries today, they may or may not accept it. Majority of the cash flows are coming from one or two products. That may or may not change, and they may continue to enjoy a high discounting on those cash flows, but there is always a risk that an unknown or a black swan can happen. So as an investor, you should be prepared, and that should be part of your exit strategy, that if you can get out from such a scenario. So those are a few examples where I'm really extra cautious, and I try and not to be positioned in any of those businesses. So whatever names that I have taken, complete disclosure, I've got absolutely no position, long or short, in any of these names. Thank you.
Thank you. So one question to Aditya sir, if he likes to take this. So Pharmeasy has made investors uneasy. So any comments to make?
That's a very interesting question. So now on the pharmacy side, I think I think yes. So I've always been saying that burning cash is not a business model. Burning cash is basically, done in times when the price of money is low, the price of money is interest rate. So for the last decade, what we saw in the startup ecosystem is essentially just leveraging free money that was floating around by the venture capitalists and the private equity guys. And I think that gave birth to certain business models which I think inherently were not so viable to begin with. Um, Having said that, the initial round of capital raise, the latest round of capital raise that the news is floating around, I don't think it's confirmed yet, but the news is floating around that there has been a capital raise by Pharmacy. So if that basically happens, then for me, that basically implies that investors have figured out how to make money, because even in this environment, if people are willing to give them money over and above what the Pharmacy had already taken from multiple other sources, then there must be some visibility of cash flows. Otherwise, at this point in cycle, somebody to give them money would have been very, very difficult. And which is why you see them.
Again, we cannot.
No, give me 1 second. Sorry.
Now it's fine, I guess.
It's fine now? Okay, cool. So I was saying that Pharmacy, obviously, the latest round of funding has been substantially below the previous round in terms of valuations. But if investors are giving them money at this juncture, I am pretty sure that um, they have figured out how to make the business profitable. Otherwise, at this point in time, to give money to a cash burning entity would not be something that a private equity or a venture capitalist will do. So I feel it is going to be very interesting to see how the business model evolves. As far as Thyrocare goes, if Pharmacy is able to raise money, probably Pharmacy, the first thing they will do is remove the pledge of Thyrocare. And if they do that, then at least from a Thyrocare shareholder standpoint, it will be incremental comfort for shareholders, because, whenever the shareholdings are pledged, you always fear if there is a margin call and, what will happen if the shares come onto the market, so on and so forth. So we'll see how that plays out. But to my mind, at this point in time, if they're able to do a capital raise, they must have a viable business program, a plan, which would entail positive cash flows going ahead. That's how I would look at it.
Thanks. Sajal sir, any comments from your end?
No, nothing to add. Nothing to add. Thank you.
So next question is from Shubham. He's asking, sir, recently there has been an update that a breakthrough where ibuprofen and para can now manufactured from paper waste, beta penine from turpentine. Although the commercial scale up might take time, do you think our players might suffer due to this? Non-green ones.
I don't know. I wouldn't be worried. I mean, see, no matter what innovation or invention you do in life sciences pharmaceutical space, you have to have the regulatory approval. It's a regulated industry, first of all. So you overnight disruption nahi hoga, because you need to go through the entire process of filing, approval, clinical trials, right? You name it, because there may be some hidden side effects that we don't know. Impurities, right? Paracetamol is a mass, Ibu is a mass product. Pretty much everyone across the globe consumes them. So US FDA is very, 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 very to the power n cautious and careful when a mass product is involved. And most of the challenges on the impurity side, they come from such products. So easy approval nahi hoga, as there will be a very thorough scrutiny, first of all. Secondly, any new technology, always think, whether it's CRISPR or not CRISPR or whatever, affordability and accessibility. 80 to 90% of global population is poor, period.
Right, sir. So next
No,
question is from
let's take
Sanjeev.
Aditya's view. Yeah, if anything is pharmaceutical, anything is kind of disruptive, you have to have the fund manager's view.
Hey, nothing to add here, Sajal bhai. I think you're right. I mean, be it IBU, be it para, any sort of process innovation, so-called old mass products, that has to have an element of validity from the clinical side, and that will need to be validated over a very long period of time, because you'll need to run fairly long and elaborate clinical trials to prove that it is the same product and similar side effects and similar efficacy. Anything failing that, FDA or any other regulatory body in the world is not going to approve it. Mm. Was I audible?
Yeah,
Hello?
yeah, perfectly
Yes, sir.
fine. Thank you.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay.
So next question, let me see. Yeah, Sanjeev is asking, do you see any specific pockets within specialty chemical space which will remain unimpacted from realization pressure? For example, surfactants play for which end application is FMCG.
No, so simple. Always use a simple template. What is the end market for this specific chemical? So you have to map it chemical by chemical. Pick a chemical, the whole value chain. What is the input? What is the output? And who consumes that output? And then figure out whether it's a mandatory consumption or it's an optional consumption, discretionary consumption. That will tell you where demand side pressure may come from. So if it's a mandatory consumption, then the demand is pretty inelastic. Value chain will tell you what's the input scenario looking like, how easy it is to switch between the inputs from expensive to less expensive, etc. And no chemical company, to my knowledge, is a one or two product company other than the examples that I mentioned. So wo risk alag hai, product concentration wala, but by and large, if you have got bought a basket of 10 products, one or two may be discretionary, one or two may be mandatory. So your economics will vary molecule by molecule. So that's why it is always advisable to go through the long term mean and try and position. If you are making a fresh investment or if you are adding to your position, you are a fundamental analyst, you know nothing about charts, etc., then look at the long term mean and try and add more only when the valuations are in your favor, i.e. below the long term mean. And even then you have to be cognizant of the fact that how the mean has progressed over the years. If there is a structural disruption in any sector, even if the stock is below the long term mean, I will not touch it, because that mean is not giving me the true reflection. The industry, if it's suddenly as in a sunset industry, or is there a structural and negative development in that whole industry, the mean will say that 5 times price to sales is the mean. The stock was at 15 times price to sales, today it's at 5 times price to sales, which is the 15-year mean, so you should be buying it. Whereas 5-10 years out, the whole industry, the mean would be redefined as 1 time sales, because the whole dynamics have turned upside down, and it will remain in that depressed situation. So Kodak as an example, when the digital came, so Kodak was a chemistry company, their fortunes changed, right, forever. So imagine someone buying Kodak at 52-week low, or a 5-year low, looking at that long term mean, gone. So generally speaking, buying below the long term mean is a good fundamental strategy, but it will not always work because of the reasons that I just explained. Maybe Ishmohit can add something. Ishmohit, feel free to jump in. Yeah.
Right, sir. I think you put it well. Um, See, I think कि मतलब because these some of the large chemical companies actually में conglomerates ही बन गए. They have multiple products. जैसे for fluorination guys, I think कि उनका specialty chemical में margins hit नहीं होएगा. और उनका मार्जिन हिट होएगा जो रेफ्रिजरेंट गैसेस पार्ट है ना उसके अंदर. And ref gases, I think, will be still 30 to 40% of EBIT in chemical business for some of them. So yeah, this is a pie which I'm tracking because हो क्या रहा है वर्ल्ड में कि no one wants to manufacture HFC at their geographies because they know it emits a lot of greenhouse gases. Then they just import it from India and China. And China पे बहुत ज़्यादा एंटी डंपिंग ड्यूटी लगाया है इस टाइम पे यूएसए ने. So one of the refrigerant gases, R134 करके, which was one of the major products for the two fluorine players, so that has been sort of, there's a 30% production cut for it in US and also consumption cut because it is one of the most highly emitting greenhouse gas. But the wonderful thing about some of these businesses is कि HFC का जो substitute है वो HFO आ रहा है, hydroolol films, which is like some 50 times lesser emissive than HFCs. अब HFO is patented by Honeywell and if I'm not mistaken, second one is DuPont, which got them patented. And patents are expiring in 2025. But the interesting thing is one of the Indian player has already developed a HFO mini pilot plant. मतलब technology 2016 में ही crack कर ली थी. And they're waiting for the patent to go away and then they'll announce a huge sized capex. So I'm very very interested in the industry in 2-3 players at the moment because I think it's like a 3-5 year story. एंड दिख रहा है यार अगर एक दो क्वार्टर की 2-3 क्वार्टर की सॉफ्टनेस है एंड अगर गलती से मीन पी या बिलो मीन चला गया तो it will sort of become very very interesting at that point of time. And you'll see even in technical charts is that some of the stronger ones they'll go into a sideways consolidation, whereas some of the weaker ones you see stage 4 charts basically developing over there. अगर आप stage analysis करवाएगा तो आप देखोगे इसमें stage 4 बन रहे होंगे weaker ones में. Stronger ones tend to in a downside as well. Sometimes they go through a consolidation period, time consolidation, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, that is what I'm tracking in today's market. Surfactants, I think थोड़ा सा इसमें भी एक मैसूर बेस्ड कंपनी है जिसका भी एजीएम है. आई थिंक अल्ट्रा मरीन इज वन ऑफ द कंपनीज जो सर्फैक्टेंट्स एंड पिगमेंट्स में है. अगेन नॉट अ बाय सेल रिकमेंडेशन बाय एनी मींस. मैं भी इस टाइम पे ट्रैक कर रहा हूँ, अपनी बिजनेस अंडरस्टैंडिंग इंप्रूव कर रहा हूँ. अभी एजीएम पे भी जाऊँगा मैसूर में जस्ट टू improve my own understanding of the business. They've also added a lot of capacities in last 2-3 years and a lot of them is like a lot of that is unutilized right now. So that is also उसका भी अभी annual report भी आया था. तो one should definitely do the hard work because board में a lot of good independent directors and a lot of credible people are sitting on the board. So yeah, one of the companies which I'm studying right now. Let's see क्या आता है उसमें. But yeah, broadly I think फ्लोरिनेशन इज वन ऑफ द स्पेसेस विच आई एम एक्साइटेड अबाउट कि यार इसमें करेक्शन आ जाए तो और मतलब बेसिकली मजा आ जाएगा टाइप्स की, थोड़ा वैल्यूएशन सस्ता मिले. बट अपार्ट फ्रॉम दैट फार्मास्यूटिकल में जो इंटरमीडिएट्स सप्लाई कर रहे हैं या तो इस टाइम पे KSMs या सॉल्वेंट्स दे रहे हैं, आई एम नॉट टू एक्साइटेड अबाउट दैट बिकॉज यू सी कि फार्मा कंपनीज ही कह रही होंगी यार कि दिस इज अ ईयर ऑफ ग्रॉस मार्जिन एक्सपेंशन, या API कंपनीज ही कह रही होंगी. सो इफ द प्राइसिंग the beautiful thing about this investing thing is here pricing and profit pool is also, it moves in stages. So value chain में profit moves they also keep shifting. तो that is where again अभी I think profit pool temporarily काफी time के लिए some of these जो upstream chemical वालों में चला गया था, but that will again shift back and some of the API companies will get back to normalized EBITDA or gross margin. But फिर भी just be a bit careful amongst them because there's so much opportunity in the markets today apart from these two sectors. So yeah, that is how I'm looking at it, Prince. And जैसे सर ने PI Industries का दिया था, I think जो कुमियाई का एक केमिकल है pyroxasulfone करके, which might be so brokerages only publish these informations, which might be contributing 60% to their exports right now. So that is a molecule. If I'm looking at PI, I'll track that like a hawk क्योंकि अभी ब्राज़ील में उसका registration हुआ है. So Brazil is the largest agrochemical market. So probably that might be one of the agchem companies that will still show growth. Like अगर because recently the largest agchem molecule वहाँ पे register हुआ है. But yeah, in these things as rightly pointed, you exit framework तो वैसे भी होना चाहिए. अगर exit framework नहीं है तो it's something that you need to work upon if you don't have an exit framework, because it's like a parachute which you can use to jump out of a falling aeroplane. But exit framework होना चाहिए because as retail investors we are not managing hundreds of crores or thousands of crores. So जो आपका agility है ना, do not lose that. And agility only comes through the idea of having a stringent exit framework. But yeah, some of these companies look very interesting and from मतलब fundamental point of view से हो सकता है technically अभी charts stage 3 stage 4 या कुछ consolidation में चल रहे हो, but that is how I'm looking at it today. Anything to add, Sajal Sir and Aditya Sir, please feel free.
No, nothing to add from my end. You covered it very well. Thank you.
Sir, one next question is around company that goes by the name of Vishnu Chemicals. So they are saying barium sulfate product is import substitute. So how can one look at it? And even in the chromium chemistry, they had 30% value growth in last financial year.
So I think the stock has done reasonably well. So whether it's Himadri or whether it's Vishnu, wherever the performance of the stock has been positive, I kind of assume that the news flow will be positive. So and then you need to see, what's the valuation like. What if any? See, chemicals is a fragile business, because majority of the downstream usage is non-discretionary. So any business where majority of the consumption downstream is fragile, uncertain, unpredictable, will naturally go through low demand and high demand or normal demand cycle. So मुझे एक्सट्रापोलेट करने में बहुत डर लगता है यार किसी भी केमिकल स्टॉक को. सो व्हाट आई डू इज, बिकॉज आई डोंट फॉलो टेक्निकल, आई डोंट अंडरस्टैंड टेक्निकल, आई टेंड टू बाय व्हेन नो वन इज इंटरेस्टेड. वेदर इट्स न्यूलैंड, सेम थीसिस जो मैंने लास्ट ईयर न्यूलैंड के लिए भी वही शेयर करी, कि जब किसी को अच्छा नहीं लग रहा था तो मुझे अच्छा लग रहा था. जब सबको अच्छा लगने लगा है, सो अ लॉट ऑफ ऑप्टिमिज्म इज ऑलरेडी इन द प्राइस. मैंने बहुत सारे एग्जांपल्स आईपीओ वाले दिए. आई कीप ट्वीटिंग, राइट? So be careful. I wish them well, both of them, or anyone who is doing well, whether it's SRF or, again, disclaimer, there is absolutely no recommendation, because we don't know what we don't know. And I'm definitely in Howard Marks camp that I'm a don't know investor, and I feel very proud about it, because मैं अपने आप को किसी गलतफहमी में नहीं रख रहा हूँ. I know that I will never be able to predict a black swan. So how do I counter that? Valuation. I will not pay even a reasonably looking valuation. If I miss the opportunity, so be it. I'm more worried about the downside, if that helps. I mean, I know Ishmohit tracks every single chemical company. If he has got anything to add on any of these names, then feel free to jump in, Ishmohit.
So Vishnu is one of the only ones which I haven't read till now, so I don't know too much about it. So really sorry.
Next question we can take, Prince.
Let me check any good question. Yeah, your views on latest pharma export data. Syngene looks good from export data. Geotest revenue coming in Q1.
Right. Good question. Not just for Syngene, any company where you have got access to export data. Just couple of things. Never assume that export data is 100% accurate. Point number one. Number two, think, will this business will be reporting only the export data related sales when the results are announced. So take Syngene, यही example इन्होंने use किया, so I'll stick to Syngene. Will Syngene be reporting the results purely on the export data related revenues, or will they also be reporting results related to their CRO business and all the rest of it? Right? Because export data, to my mind, I'm not an expert, and Ishmohit, please jump in. My sense is export data is only for the export oriented businesses. So we don't get the export data for IT services or SaaS companies. And Syngene is also a SaaS company. You may or may not know it. It's science as a service. That is also SaaS. So if you are looking at the Zoetis only data, of course, they will continue to ramp up Zoetis, and they may get another molecule from Zoetis. So abhi Librela is already there. They may get Solensia, the cat molecule, the map for the cats, and many more. And they may or may not be disclosing all of those in the pipeline, but that's only a small component. Syngene is not today, at least today, Syngene is not a biomanufacturing company. They are ramping up their manufacturing capability and capacity, but they are not there yet as a percentage. How much of the commercial manufacturing revenue as a percentage of Syngene's total revenue is there? So the needle may not be, it may not, even if it's a 500% jump YOY, it may not be moving the needle for Syngene on a console basis. Aditya, you track Syngene. Ishmohit, you also track Syngene. Please help us out.
Yeah, I think see two things. One, first of all, first of all, the export data comes from the shipments, the ship container port data, port level data. Hota hai ye. Now, Syngene, obviously, as you said, manufacturing for them is a very small component of the business. The services business is a much larger business. So that doesn't get captured here. Number two, many of these products also get airlifted. And I don't believe this shipment data includes airlifted uh, products. So even within manufacturing, this may not be a complete set, or this may not give you a complete and true picture. हाँ, बट लाइक फॉर लाइक अगर आपको डायरेक्शनली देखना है कि लास्ट क्वार्टर में यही एक्सपोर्ट डेटा $10 million था, इस क्वार्टर में यही एक्सपोर्ट डेटा $12 million है, तो यू आर राइट, मे बी देयर इज अ $2-3-5 million डेल्टा देयर व्हिच may reflect in within the reported numbers, but it's not that the entire reported number will grow by 20%. Is that that bucket will grow by 20%, and the other buckets will do what they have to do. So that's fairly clear.
Yeah, exactly. As far as manufacturing ramp up is concerned, Syngene will hopefully continue to be in the ramp up mode for next 10 years, because they are starting from almost zero base in their manufacturing. Mangalore API, US FDA and PMDA approval, whenever that comes, will only add to that manufacturing. But it's a very small component of their overall. Syngene today is a majorly non-manufacturing company. That will definitely change 10 years out, or 7 years out, whatever.
Just to add on this export data bit, um, आई थिंक लास्ट Q1 में तो वैसे ही उसमें मैन्युफैक्चरिंग रेवेन्यूज नहीं थे, तो लिब्रेला का आई थिंक जो उसका कॉन्ट्रैक्ट है फुल्ली लाइव गया है, तो इस वजह से वो 293%, आई थिंक आई ऑल्सो रेड दैट ब्लूमबर्ग क्विंट वाला आर्टिकल, दैट ग्रोथ seems to come in. So it's on a मतलब it's on a non existent base या फिर very low base पे जो वो manufacturing revenue growth दिख रही है. But just 2-3 important points while using export data मतलब broadly, तो मतलब एक्सपोर्ट डेटा अगर आप यूज कर रहे हो, सो वन ऑफ द क्वालिटेटिव फैक्टर्स इज कि एक्सपोर्ट डेटा में यू कैन स्पेशली फॉर स्मॉलर कंपनीज जो मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में हो या गेयर्स बना रही है, शंट्स बना रही है, उनमें यू गेट अ वेरी गुड सेंस ऑफ क्वालिटी ऑफ कस्टमर्स, कि what type of customers they are supplying to, tier 1 OEMs of the world or not, and you also get a sense कि what new customers that they are adding. जैसे there is one of the manufacturers of gears who is exporting to Japan and one of the largest companies in Japan, then you get a sense कि अच्छा ये कंपनी कुछ डिफरेंट कर रही है यार, एक्सपोर्ट डेटा में इसलिए दिख रहा है. पर एक्सपोर्ट डेटा में जैसे आदित्य सर ने बोला, काफ़ी बारी एयरलिफ्टेड मॉलिक्यूल्स या एयरलिफ्टेड गुड्स का डेटा नहीं आता उसमें, तो समटाइम्स इट कैन ऑल्सो फूल यू एज एन इन्वेस्टर. बट ब्रॉड डायरेक्शन जानने के लिए इट्स अ गुड सोर्स, but just don't what I've started sensing like talking to a lot of investors is कि एक महीने का एक्सपोर्ट डेटा खराब होते हैं, then they basically become disappointed with the company and then they start taking directional calls. I think that is so फिर मतलब वेयर हाउस बाहर ही जाके बैठना पड़ेगा कि यार यहाँ से इतनी शिपमेंट हुई है नहीं हुई है. So don't get involved too much into basically that game if you are tracking the export data. But yeah, directionally जानने के लिए, industries का जानने के लिए, quality of customers का जानने के लिए, it's a really really good source. So that is that.
Aditya sir, that question on hospital, if you would like to take.
Yeah, I think the question was just for the benefit of Sajal and Ishmohit and others who are on the call. The question was that Medanta, does multidisciplinary hospitals, but they don't do women and child care, which is something what Rainbow does. And Rainbow basically makes good margins and good money here. So why doesn't somebody like a Medanta want to do it? I mean, broadly, I think if I understood correctly, that was the question. So look here, is what I keep saying, specialty matters, right? So Medanta Hospital is not built for a 30, 40,000 ARPOB business. It is built for a 60, 70, 65,000 ARPOB business. And within that, if you bring maternity childcare, you have to understand maternity childcare is a high loss business. High loss as in once a woman who's pregnant gets admitted, she might deliver the baby on day one, might deliver it on day two, and might remain in the hospital for another 3, 4 days after delivery, sometimes even a week if there is any complications in the child's delivery. And therefore the length of stay is on an average longer in maternity than it is otherwise. And therefore a Medanta may not necessarily want that kind of business. Rainbow chose that business and designed the facilities and the doctor payroll and the nurses according to suit that business. So it is a horses for courses thing here. It is not that कि Medanta cancer क्यों नहीं करेगा या Medanta maternity क्यों नहीं करेगा या HCG maternity क्यों नहीं करेगा. These are not right comparables. These are different hospitals. They're different specialties. They're built differently. There are different kind of doctors, different kind of nursing, different kind of ICUs. In a Rainbow Hospital, you might have 5, 6, 7 neonatal ICUs. In a Medanta, you might not even have one neonatal ICU. So it completely. So these hospitals are designed, built around these specialties, which are already decided for them. That these are the specialties that we will address, and the facility is designed around the specialty. So a Medanta probably will never take up maternity, and HCG will definitely never take up maternity. And the Rainbow may not ever take up oncology because the facilities are not built for oncology in Rainbow. So that was, I think, my response to the question that guy asked. Anything to add here, Sajal bhai, Ishmohit?
No, you've covered it very well. Nothing to add.
I think Abhi, like sir put it wonderfully well. Malab, just imagine, malab, if someone's from Hyderabad over here, so they might have been to a Rainbow Childcare Hospital. So just imagine the interior of a Rainbow Hospital versus the interior of a Narayana or a Global Healthcare. So these are very very small differences which make a huge impact on child's experience within a hospital, because anyways going to hospital is a bit traumatic for the child as well and for the parents as well. But if a child goes there and ऊपर उसका environment वहाँ पे ऐसे swings लगी हुई हैं, slides लगी हुई हैं, पूरी walls are pink painted, that type of environment you won't see in an HCG or a global healthcare. So very slight differences the way they are built. जैसे neonatal ICU है, so that is almost 18% of beds for Rainbow, and that business will always have underutilization because you want to be prepared in just in case of any emergency. अगर कोई premature baby born हो गया, उसको ICU service चाहिए. So if you claim to be specialized in child care or pediatrics, so you want to be provider of that service. तो वहाँ पे unutilized beds तो रहेंगे, but that also sort of builds some sort of barriers to entry in your business because you're keeping doctors full time. जैसे आई थिंक पूरे हॉस्पिटल इंडस्ट्री में जो डॉक्टर एज अ परसेंटेज ऑफ इनकम स्टेटमेंट है, दैट इज हाईएस्ट इन वेदांत एंड सेकंड हाईएस्ट इन रेनबो एक्चुअली. एंड रेनबो में डिफरेंस यूनिट इकोनॉमिक्स में क्या आएगा कि पर बेड केपेक्स 60 लाख रुपीस का है एंड ए आर पी ओ बीज आर 48,000 to 50,000 रुपीज. तो मतलब अफोर्डेबल हॉस्पिटल से थोड़ा सा ऊपर ए आर पी ओ भी है. सो यूनिट इकोनॉमिक्स बहुत लुक्रेटिव हो जाती है, बट फिर बैरियर्स टू स्केल भी प्रॉब्ली एक टाइम बाद शायद से आए. बट अभी तक लास्ट 8 years में तो मतलब दे हैव स्केल्ड वंडरफुली वेल. एंड आई थिंक इस इंडस्ट्री में सूर्या इज प्रॉब्ली द वन विच इज मेकिंग सिमिलर मार्जिन विच इज बेस्ड आउट ऑफ मुंबई एंड राजस्थान. बट आई थिंक इतना मार्जिन और इतने स्केल पे और लेस स्कीम पेशेंट्स, इट्स मतलब बोथ अ डिफरेंशिएटेड सेट ऑफ बिजनेसेस. क्यों यहाँ पे इंटरनेशनल पेशेंट्स भी नहीं होते चाइल्ड केयर में, मतलब 1 or 2% इज ओनली इंटरनेशनल पेशेंट्स. Whereas for other hospitals 7 to 10% international patients भी होएगा. So yeah, within the hospital space also there are different unique business models, and that's the fun of studying them.
And see, the other funny part here is this. Now, just imagine, why is this a discipline where there is no international tourism? क्योंकि लॉज हैं. लॉज क्या है? बच्चा जिस ज्योग्राफी में पैदा होगा वहां का सिटीजन हो जाएगा. तो ऐसा नहीं है कि अमेरिकन कपल यहाँ आके बच्चा पैदा नहीं कर सकते हैं, उनको सस्ता पड़ेगा यहाँ आके बच्चा पैदा करना, लेकिन वो जो बच्चा होगा वो इंडियन सिटीजन बन जाएगा बिकॉज इज बॉर्न इन इंडिया. सो सो नो मैटर हाउ एक्सपेंसिव इट इज, बच्चा तो यूएस में पैदा करेंगे बिकॉज दे वांट हिम टू बी अ ग्रीन कार्ड होल्डर फ्रॉम बर्थ. and no need to marry for a green card. just just saying. I mean, these are tic tacs. These are things which, unless you're a part of the industry, unless you think about the industry, these things don't prop up in your heads. Yeah.
Agreed, sir. Wonderful point.
Sajal sir, lately you pointed out PAP is a commodity and whatever the synthesis route may be. So any views around that? The company, there is a lot of talk around that.
Which company is there any
Sadhana,
specific?
Sadhana Nitro.
Ha, so there is definitely that chatter that they have got a differentiated technology. Unless your cost is a fraction of what is coming from China, so there's a glut in PAP at the moment. So you may be having a great technology, but your if your cost is marginally lower, then it doesn't add much value, right? And secondly, you need product qualification. See, I'll give you the example of the amine duos, right? So Balaji and the alkyl, their amines were not qualified, and none of the Indian players were buying from them until about 2018-19, if I'm not mistaken. They were importing. So you may be having the largest capacity, you may be having the best in class technology, you may be having महादेव शंकर भगवान स्वयं मैन्युफैक्चर कर रहे हैं, बट अगर यूएस एफडीए का ठप्पा नहीं है, सो एक्सपोर्ट में तो जा नहीं पाएगा. सो यू कैन स्टिल sell in sell to companies who are in India में there is no value for any quality. So you can make whatever, सब चलता है. तो यहाँ चल जाएगा, या certain African markets, even some of the African markets are more stringent and quality conscious compared to India today. Surprise, surprise. So where you don't need a US FDA approval on an input, there is fine. But PAP as a space is not looking great from an investor's point of view. PAP as a space is excellent from a consumer point of view. So any company that is having PAP as their input will is smiling and will continue to smile, because they were facing the brunt of inflation in the PAP prices. So the whole equation has reversed. वही कोई जीता कोई हारा.
Right, sir. Sir, one question is around, although that was mentioned in the tweet, why you reduced position in granules?
हाँ, तो यार देखो, एक तो IP is a very important asset for any company, and pharmaceutical is not an exception. And you have to be 100% agile and double sure about your IP protection. Have extra layers of firewalls. Make sure that you do the penetration testing on a regular basis using the services of a certified pen test provider. So pen test is for cyber security. Those who understand, those who are from the IT industry, penetration testing is a norm, and most companies do that at least once every year. And the outcome of the pen test or penetration testing will throw a list of vulnerabilities. So software patch nahi hua hai, so on and so forth. And these vulnerabilities are like the openings in your house. So you've left the door open. That's what a vulnerability is, and the intruders will get in red carpet kind of a welcome, and they will come in, they will just hack your space, and then the ransomware show will start, right? And IP is the only thing that you have other than your manufacturing, because all your data, your IP, you may or may not have filed those patents. All that moat disappears in a jiffy. So that is one thing that was worrying. And if you read the Q3 transcript of FY23, I asked a specific question about the change in the back end and using this fermentation enzymatic biocide, and there is always a risk in a grant transformation. And what Granules is undertaking is a great grand transformation, and it should work out. But what if, as an investor, you got to be extra cautious? So that was the second reason. And third was the final nail in the coffin, perhaps, was the disclaimer that they made, which I attached in my tweet, where they are sounding rather cautious in terms of their results. So you connect the dots, you add all three things together, and you kind of, so that again, it's a judgment. I may or may not be wrong, right, in this judgment, that I may be better off deploying that capital into some other opportunity where I have got earnings visibility better over the next, say, 18 to 24 months, because I continue to believe that the real outcome of this backward integration, the green chemistry backward integration that Granules are doing, will be visible somewhere around FY26, maybe FY27. So that is kind of a black box until then, because most of the times these disruptive innovations, they work fine at a lab or a small scale. Only when you scale up, you find all sorts of challenges which you may or may not have anticipated in advance. So वही risk वाला थोड़ा सा cover करके चल रहा हूँ, और there was no other reason. Otherwise, they have executed. See, this management has executed very well over the last 20-25 years. I keep harping on that point. This company used to be sub 25 crore top line company when I started tracking them, and their annual reports were also good, well described, and they always had that differentiated DNA. So the CMD was right in answering my question on the third quarter call, that that's part of our DNA, that's always been. But
Sir, is it me only, or Ishmohit, you cannot hear sir as well?
No, I think we lost him. His voice is not.
Sajal sir, we cannot hear you from last 30-40 seconds.
hello.
Yeah, right now we can.
Yeah, because
We
I had an incoming call actually, so I had to
Okay,
attend that.
okay.
So yeah, no, connection
So
is fine.
so right.
So I
So
think I answered the question on Granules, right? And that next question.
yes. So Sajal sir, like what apart from chemical and pharma healthcare space you are looking, and you sense some valuation comfort?
यार वैल्यूएशन कंफर्ट तो मुझे जोमेटो में भी फिर से नहीं दिख रहा. आई हैव नेम्ड दिस वन बिफोर, when it was near 50 to 60 band. It was less expensive, let's put it that way. It never, it was never cheap. Newgen is another name that I've mentioned. Now I've read those news articles where the IT, there is another optimism again coming up in IT. But even in case of IT, there will always be discretionary, non-discretionary. What if US goes into recession a year later? There will inevitably be an impact on IT, but there may not be. So if the recession comes and they want to cut costs even more, and they start even a greater thrust on outsourcing, and then Newgen used to be 360 370 ka bhav. So the price is already run up, and many other IT companies. So pessimism, textile is one pocket where there is pessimism. But is textile, from a consumption point of view, is it discretionary or non-discretionary? You can wait, and I've seen this pattern here as well, that people have started recycling their old clothes. So a lot of apps have been set up where you can recycle your wardrobe, you can trade in, and you get some money back. And people are really stressed here in terms of, the inflation is through the roof, the mortgage rates are climbing, and the 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 income is not rising at the same rate in the Western economies. So textile, from a valuation perspective, is looking reasonably well placed. But the demand is not a given in textile. Cement, again, it's an infra. So I think anything which is domestic facing will continue to be buoyant in the run up to the election, because you need to give mass employment to people. So anything on the infra side, I mean, infra mein you can play through a low fixed cost company like an EPC player. I would much rather go with a high fixed cost company business, because the entry barriers are higher. So you cannot set up a cement plant in a jiffy. You cannot set up a building materials. Whatever. APL Apollo, just disclaimer, I'm just using that as an example, right? I know this stock has done exceptionally well, or JSW Steel or whatever. Generally speaking, high fixed cost businesses will have higher entry barrier, because you cannot set up a replacement or alternate immediately. But I think it's very easy to figure out where the valuations are favorable. You go to the screener and map out the 10-15 year valuation, and look at every single parameter, not just PE, not just EV EBITDA. You also look at price to sales, you also look at price to book. And if the stock is below or near the long term mean across all parameters, all boxes should be ticking. PE should be near the long term mean, EV EBITDA should be near the long term mean, price to book should be near the long term mean. That long term mean for price to book could be 1x, could be 3x, could be 4x, whatever that number is. It should be near that mean, and the price to sales and the debt should be reasonable, or no debt, right? So having small amount of debt. So let's take an example. What is reasonable debt? If your long term short term debt put together is, let's say, 100 units, 100 crores, and your average operating cash flow over the last, let's say, 3 years is 50 crores, then it's reasonable, because then you can service that debt. And I'm not taking the last year's operating cash flow, I'm taking the last 3-4 years ka average. So if the last 3-4 years average is 50, and your debt is no more than, long term short term included, no more than 100, then your balance sheet is reasonable. So, and then I also look at how the operating cash flow has panned out over a period of time. So what was your operating cash flow in 2010, 2015, and 2020, and so on, in gaps of 5 years or 6 years or whatever? And if there is a rising trend in those operating cash flows, and then it kind of gives me a signal that the business is generating increased amount of operating cash. Then I also look at ROE. What is the ROE? So any business where ROE is, let's say, 20%, and it's growing at or below 20%, it's self-sustaining, right? Because then you don't need external funding. So pretty much anywhere where you have got a valuation comfort, long term mean example that I gave, and you have got no concerns on the balance sheet, you have got no concerns on the cash flows, you know nothing negative about the promoter groups or the managements, then all the broad boxes are ticking. And then you also think about what's the sustainable economics. Any company that can sustain in a normal or a sluggish economy, if you can sustain, then you have the right to win in a buoyant economy. um, those are the kind of 3 4 5 broad checklist items that I would use to figure out any pocket where the optimism or euphoria is missing. And in a bull market, it's not easy to find such examples. Pharmaceutical, we have been hosting these spaces for the simple reason that there was pessimism. Some stocks have started appreciating from those levels, and that's the nature of the beast. That's how markets always play out. There will always be a bearish trend in one or two sectors, there will always be a bullish trend in one or two sectors. You have to position accordingly.
Ishmohit, what you are looking at these days? Anything interesting pockets?
I think broadly, मतलब capital goods में some of the steel wire companies where the entire thing is customized based for customer requirements, not easy to do business. तो मतलब देखो, पहली चीज तो ये है कि उतना ज्यादा चीजें सस्ती नहीं है, तो यू हैव टू स्ट्रेच योर इमेजिनेशन टू इवन कंसिडर सम ऑफ द थिंग्स एज रीजनेबली वैल्यूड. डेफिनेटली नॉट चीप. 10-12 पी वाले तो मिल नहीं रहे, 20-25 पी तो नॉर्मल हो गई है. ऐसी देयर इज एन इंडस्ट्रियल प्रिंटिंग कंपनी विच सेल्स द प्रिंटर एट ब्रेक इवन और लॉस, देन मेक्स बल्क ऑफ द मार्जिन्स ऑन selling the consumables to them. Basically it's a razor blade business model. ऐसी एक मैकेनिकल सील्स में भी कंपनी थी. मतलब द थिंग इज कि like it's too tough these markets, because even that company has this type of business model. So mechanical, so framework broad यही है कि यार supply side dominance ढूंढ रहे हैं. Not many companies are doing those business. These companies are market leaders and they are not too discovered, क्योंकि cap goods में ना ऐसे बहुत manufacturing में some of the companies you get which are not too discovered. जैसे mechanical seal में भी यही था कि so the guy who started the company with one of the German giants JV में, so he did really well over the years. And then 2009 में that German giant का divestiture हो गया था internationally, तो 2009 में उसने खुद ही company start करी, 2009 में, right, 09 में. And since then it's a business where you need to get accreditations. तो भी nuclear accreditation भी मिला उस company को, and one of the only companies who's also accredited by accreditation यहाँ से मिला, API से, American Petroleum Institute से. So that is the type of companies we are studying, because base margins 28% EBITDA margin है. जब O&M contracts kick in, I think O&M business में generally 40 to 50% EBITDA margin रहता है. So that type of businesses we study कि supply side में आप 2-3 लोग ही हैं, ज़्यादा है भी नहीं, और then you can sort of think about it. Then wind energy में जो पूरा turnaround आया है, so one of the proxies to wind energy has a 90% market share within that sector. But you consider these things as deeply cyclical. अगर बात भी गई तो deeply cyclical है, तो पहले दिमाग में ये framework जरूर होना चाहिए कि यार capital cycle में कहाँ है. And I will highly request you should read two books. One is Capital Returns by Edward Chancellor. That is a book which I reread every year. And second is Profiting from Bull and Bear Markets. और एक हमारी वीडियो जरूर देख लेना यार. हमने एक वीडियो बनाई थी YouTube पे. That video took like 4-5 weeks to make. How to Make Money in Stocks by William O'Neill in Indian Context. So these 3 books will also give you an exit strategy for cyclicals, especially because half of it is cyclical in nature. But yeah, these are set of opportunities in banks and financials. May we are looking at some of those small finance banks, like who are delivering 2% ROA, 16% ROE. They're still priced at 1.6, 1.7x price to book. They're coming out of the NPA cycle. Credit costs are falling. Like credit growth is accelerating. So these are broadly the type of opportunities we look at. Auto anks में there are a couple of companies जो bottoms up देखो तो यार अपने जो गैस्केट्स का बिजनेस है उसमें मार्केट लीडर है. एक जो स्पोर्ट्स बाइक में गियर्स लगते हैं उसमें मार्केट लीडर है. पीछे एक स्टंट्स वाला है जो मार्केट लीडर था, नाउ आई थिंक वाइडली डिस्कवर्ड स्टॉक. देन देयर इज अनदर बिजनेस व्हिच इज इनटू ड्राइवर इंफॉर्मेशन सिस्टम्स. कि भाई आजकल आप देखोगे तो पहले स्पीडोमीटर आते थे तो उसमें सिर्फ एक नीडल लगी होती थी एंड माइलेज का मीटर होता था. नाउ एवरीथिंग इज लाइक एवरीथिंग लुक्स इलेक्ट्रॉनिक इन फॉर्म. सो लाइक content per vehicle is going up. अभी recently, so a very anecdotal evidence, recently sat in someone's XUV 700 जो नई लेके आए थे. That car looks कि वो पूरा इलेक्ट्रॉनिक कार ही है. मतलब महिंद्रा का तो गाड़ी भी नहीं लग रहा था. So content per vehicle is going up drastically. So some of the beneficiaries of that trend is something that you have to check out for, क्योंकि वो market leaders ही हैं. चाहे वो aesthetics में हो, चाहे वो DIS में हो, चाहे वो कंपनीज बेसिकली गियर्स बना रही हो स्पोर्ट्स बाइक्स के लिए. सो दैट इज द टाइप ऑफ ट्रेंड दैट यू हैव टू कैच बॉटम्स अप. एंड कैप गुड्स का तो थीम है, EMS स्पेस का भी थीम है, बट सम ऑफ द स्टॉक्स हैव गॉन बलिस्टिक. बट EMS कंपोनेंट्स में आपको स्टोरीज मिलेंगी विच आर मैन्युफैक्चरिंग दोस डाइलेक्ट्रिकल फिल्म्स. FY25-26 में न्यू कैपेसिटीज आ रहे हैं. दोस जंप इन कैपेसिटीज विल बी स्टीप. But yeah, you have to keep checking the supply side, if more manufacturers are coming in for those products or not. So this is why like always a PF approach helps. Like तो PF approach में क्या है, you become the house. Like so basically expected value of your bets is positive. You buy 15-20 type stocks. 4-5 stocks में तो हमेशा स्टोरी वो पैन आउट नहीं करेगी जो आप सोचोगे. पर जहाँ 4-5 में सप्लाई साइड डोमिनेंस थीम कैचेस ऑन, दे एंटर स्टेज 2, then you really make a big killing in markets. So that is how we are thinking about it. So it's a market to stay invested in some of the good holdings. But yeah, additional cash I've थोड़ा सा फिल्टर अभी और नैरो कर दिया क्वालिटी के लिए कि मेरे को नेगेटिव कैश फ्लो कंपनीज में नहीं जाना. दैट इज समथिंग आई एम वेरी श्योर ऑफ. मेरे को हाई डेट कंपनीज में इस टाइम पे नहीं जाना. B2G बिजनेसेस में इस टाइम पे नहीं जा रहा. सो दोज आर सम ऑफ द थिंग्स विच आई हैव क्लैरिफाइड विद माई सेल्फ. यार ये एक्चुअली नींद ही नहीं आती लेने के बाद ये सब. So that is how I'm sort of thinking about it. Insurance aggregators, maybe I think piche, like one of the only new age companies which is like broken even and sort of will start generating EBITDA level मतलब positivity और cash flows भी generate करने लग जाएगी. So yeah, bottoms up you start looking at these things यार. वो एक map वाला भी company है जो हर चीज का एक प्रॉक्सी है, बट वैल्यूएशन बहुत महंगा है आज. बट जो ड्रोन वोन आपका आता है, ड्रोन में सब में उसी का मैप यूज हो रहा है. But yeah, valuation is not favorable, but something that you keep tracking for your observation sakes. So that is how we are sort of thinking about the markets.
Yeah, exactly. And Ishmohit named all the great books. The only problem with these reading these books is in a bull market you don't have the time to read a 300-page book. So maybe I can suggest you a simpler solution, more less time consuming solution. There is a book written by Saurabh Bashar and Vishal Mittal, Masterclass with Super Investors, right? Uh, in that book there is one chapter from Kenneth Andrade. If you could read that chapter, is about 10 15 pages only. That chapter will give you everything about how to play cyclicals or any sector. So he has given examples from MRF, he has given examples from textile sector, literally explaining the framework that when it is a good time to buy. He's comparing gross profits with the enterprise value is market cap plus total debt. So all those frameworks, in a very simple, easy to understand, digest language, and literally 15 max 20 pages, that's it. In that book, so that's another good book. One cardinal mistake that most investors, seasoned as well as new ones, they make in a bull market is because you want to make quick returns, because पड़ोसी भी पैसा कमा रहा है, आपको भी कमाना है. So in the quest to make, get rich quick, you start trading down the quality curve. So you start, tier 2 companies have done well in a sector. Tier 2 companies then were the fast followers and they also appreciated. Then you start looking for tier 4, tier 3, tier 5 kachra stock, anticipating that jyoti bane jwala. So you start compromising on quality. Never do that in a mature bull market. Try and stick with the quality. You will at least get your money back, because करेक्शन आपको बता के नहीं आएगा कि मैं स्टार्ट होऊंगा 1 week आफ्टर द इंडिपेंडेंस डे. ऐसा नहीं होगा ना. So you cannot predict it. All of a sudden something will happen and market will start correcting as if markets were waiting for that SQs or news. And then you will be scratching your head कि यार ये कैसे हुआ. And most of the time your stop losses will not be hitting in a black swan, whatever. So bottom line is stick to quality in any sector, even in a bull market. And the definition of quality is not large caps, by the way. Definition of quality is the quality of cash flow. I may be having 1,000 crore market cap company with exceptionally secure cash flows, and to me that's quality. And I will not go into the large caps, US generics as an example. So we have seen what happened in 2015. All those frontline players were quality, right? Tier 1, the entire index is formed of them. What happened in the last 8 9 years? Losses, right? Most of them. Very very few are above those 2015 prices. So a lot of damage. So again, have a very clear understanding of what is a quality. Quality is not in the market cap. Quality is in the sustainability and the economics of the business and the sustainability of the cash flows, the balance sheet, so on and so forth.
So Prince, really sorry, I'll just have to take a
Sure,
leave
sure.
because I've just recovered from a flu. तो थोड़ी देर पहले Starbucks आया था तो वापस घर जा रहा हूँ. तो thank you so much for giving me an opportunity as well. Thank you so much, Sajal Sir. It's always
Pleasure is all ours, Ishmohit. Thanks for all those contributions. I think we should wrap up, Prince. I see Aditya has also left.
Sir,
तो
he
बड़ा
was
बड़ा
also
बोरिंग हो
like,
जाएगा यार. मैं तो वैसे ही ट्वीट करता रहता हूँ. So I talk a lot. तो मैं कितना
right.
So if there are any sort of one or two
Sir,
last questions,
last क्वेश्चन एक
last question.
आरती
Okay, promise.
हाँ आरती इंडस्ट्रीज पे 2-3 क्वेश्चन है तो वहां पे लाइक कितनी पिटाई होने के बाद इज इट एन अपॉर्चुनिटी इन मेकिंग और समथिंग इज मिसिंग आई मीन वी मिस रीडिंग
Nahi, a lot of price has damage. So benzene, I'm little uncertain with benzene. As from a, I'm purely talking from a pharmaceutical perspective. There's a lot of biocatalysis that is replacing a lot of solvents and KSM in the pharmaceutical space, because I track it closely. So enzymatic route, a lot of companies are embracing this green chemistry in pharmaceutical API supply chain. So that is one, and that's the reason I tweeted that benzene is perhaps at the risk of disruption from these enzymatic green chemistry alternatives, because they are cheaper and they are more economical, as well as environment friendly. So and the reason and this kind of disruption will never happen overnight, because you need regulatory approval to switch, uh, and so that process itself could have taken 2-3 years for these companies, and now kind of these companies have started slowly switching. So that definitely is one headwind, but wo price may reflect hua hai directly indirectly. Plus Aarti Industries is another chemical company, and most chemical companies will have both elements of mandatory and discretionary consumption. So Aarti Pharma, which is the spin-off, is mainly into pharmaceutical related chemicals, so their demand is more predictable. Less less uncertainty on the demand side for something like an Aarti Pharma vis-a-vis Aarti Industries, the parent, right? So think think from whether it's a surfactants company, or whether it's a paint or pigment company, whether it's any sort of intermediates, you have to map out the value chain. Because even if you're buying, let's say Aarti Industries is cheap today, and the worst is in the price. Okay, आपने ले लिया, अब वो 6 महीना स्टॉक एक नैरो रेंज में ही रहा. You could have made more money in a capex theme or an infra theme or whatever. That is an opportunity loss. You should buy a business that has been disrupted and is sitting near the lows. किसी को bottom नहीं पता, मेरे को भी नहीं पता, आपको भी नहीं पता. वो जो कोई कह रहा है कि he knows the bottom, they're a liar. किसी को नहीं पता. So we don't know where the bottom is. So maybe you wait for an early signs of recovery and you let go that initial 10-15%. किसको आके बताना है कि मैंने बॉटम पकड़ लिया? छोड़ दो, अपॉर्चुनिटी कॉस्ट के हिसाब से सोचो ना. तो that would be my take. So think in terms of what's the end consumer, discretionary, non-discretionary, and a lot of disruption is happening and will continue to happen from the biotechnology side on the entire chemicals landscape. A lot of this is highly polluting, and we know what's happening on the flooding and this torrential downpours, cloud burst, and whatnot. Everyone is paying the price, right? So sustainability, industry 5, biotechnology, these are long range investment themes, and they will continue to take away market share from the traditional businesses. And I'm not suggesting that there's a specific company which you should avoid, or but be aware of. Don't ये price anchoring छोड़ दो कि 1000 से गिर के 400 आ गया तो सस्ता हो गया. It may not be. It may be cheap, but it may remain cheap. Sudarshan Chemical, as an example, right? It remained at a low level for donkey's years. Valuation-wise, it was cheap. Last year, it was cheap over several years, right? So just because a stock is cheap, we don't buy it. We only buy it when the future earnings start recovering. So Laurus example. Laurus was cheap going into Q4. Laurus is cheap even today. Q1 results will be disappointing. We don't know how the market would react. Stock may be below 300 again. It may or may not be. But we know that Laurus will start reversing the earnings compression starting fourth quarter of this fiscal. And then we'll hopefully, fingers crossed, barring any unforeseen, they will have a sustainable run of um, 5, 6, 7, 8 quarters. So whole of FY25 and even 26. So that is the time when you should be positioning, when the worst is behind in earnings. Forget the stock price. We never know whether the stock price has hit the bottom or not. At least if you are not a technical, I'm not a technical chartist, so I will never figure that out. I will see how the earnings cycle is looking like, and when I know that the earnings is about to recover and the worst in the earnings is behind. Same FDC. You look at the last two fiscals of FDC. Again, there is no recommendation. I'm giving you examples. They haven't done anything on the earnings side. So if the earnings start recovering, that's when you should be positioning. Not because the stock is cheap. The cheap may remain cheap forever. So let's close with that sort of thought. And again, a strong disclaimer that none of these stocks mentioned, any sort of, no one knows anything. Yeah, sab kuch random hai. Everything is unpredictable, and daily news flow aa rahi hai, daily views change hota hai. So just take this as a gupshup session for learning or entertainment more than the learning, and wish you all a very happy weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And to close, like those who joined late can listen to the recording. I'll be uploading on YouTube by tomorrow, most probably. And one another book which sir has also pinned to his Twitter handle is The 5 Rules of Successful Stock Investing, Pat Dorsey. That is a complete book in itself. So
Excellent book, and it's got a sector by sector, so you could just pick up the sector on pharmaceuticals. You see the challenges there. You could pick up any sector. It's a great book, and that's the reason I will never remove that tweet, because newcomers and new investors, aspirants, teens and 20s will continue to join, right? And so give them as much help as we possibly can. That's the least we could do. Thank you.
right, sir. Thank you, sir. Good night. Take care.
Good night. Aditya, your voice is breaking up.
Suggestion of the previous
In the last 60, 90 seconds, I couldn't hear anything.
Okay, sir. Like
sound was
we
obviously
lost you last 30, 40 seconds. We cannot hear what you
coming.
said. There is some voice issue.
Achha, was